Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon joins me, and we're going to talk about the New York Knicks. We're going to talk a little bit about the Orlando Magic, but more than that, we're going to talk about Chris Paul. We're going to talk about Derek Queen and Zion Williamson and the Oklahoma City Thunder. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? How are you doing? Had some more 5th and 6th grade boys basketball this weekend. Picked up a couple dubs. Proud of the young guys. And then it was a good one. My son's team, who I do not coach because that's not healthy for our relationship. We're very competitive. Couple losses, but the young man's learning how to lose, which is also good for development at this age. So all good on that front. And then, of course, just watch as much college and NBA hoops as I can.
Yeah, it was fun. So Saturday is our Thanksgiving day here, where because there's not a Thanksgiving holiday here, Laura's parents have a bunch of their friends over and have like the family over and everything and do a big Thanksgiving thing because Laura has dual citizenship and, obviously there's a real American vibe to the house with me involved and, with Laura's dad and everything like that. So that was nice. So while you guys get to eat turkey and everything on Thursday, we did it on this Saturday, which meant that yesterday I had to catch up like crazy on basketball on Sunday. So that was fun.
Randy did ask me about that because I was talking to her, okay, Sam and I are recording on Sunday. I have to record the Pistons Pulse on Sunday night. And then, during the week, I'll talk to Sam and figure out when we want to record. And she's like, well, he'll be busy on Thursday as well. I was like, I don't know, because honestly, Thursday night is Friday morning for him anyway. I have no idea what they do and don't celebrate there. So she was actually curious about this in terms of what you guys do and don't do in terms of the Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah, Laura will be at work on Thursday. Like I will be probably working myself on Thursday. We'll see. There's a chance I will take like Friday just because there's not going to be a whole lot going on Friday and just kind of hang out a little bit. Maybe watch some movies and stuff. But yeah, like it's just not a thing here.
Yeah.
Just think about like the parameters of the holiday in terms of what it is. Like the American Native Americans, I guess, for lack of a better word, did not break bread with the colonists over here. There are different things that happened over here, but not the same.
Yeah, that's what I assume it would be vastly different.
Yeah. Vastly different. One thing that is not vastly different is the amount of content we're putting out over on the Substack. Game Theory, samv.substack.com. Bryce had a breakdown on Tyrse Maxey. I think we're going to talk about Tyrse Maxey today too.
We will.
That is one name that I forgot about in the intro. Tyrse Maxey looks outstanding, and Bryce broke down what makes Tyrse Maxey so special over on the Substack. Game Theory, samv.substack.com. Game Theory, samv.substack.com. Go hit that subscribe button. It is the best way you can support the show. It is for the amount of content that we end up putting out. We're putting out like 4 or 5 videos a week. You're getting something almost every weekday. I feel like there just is not going to be a better price point than what you're getting over on that channel. So Game Theory, samv.substack.com. I will have something on Derek Queen probably for Monday because I feel like I need to do another one because Derek Queen is a fascinating player, and we will talk about Derek Queen a little bit later on too. Bryce, instead of me going first this week on this beautiful week 5, I guess we're calling it. Like, I don't know what, once we get into the NBA season, like we started with like week 1 takeaways. Now we're into week 5. It's not college football. It's not like the NFL schedule where there are weeks, but for lack of a better term, we're into week five takeaways here. Bryce, you've brought 3 things to the table. I've brought 3 things to the table. You go first, because often I go first and I want to give you the floor.
I was wondering when we were going to stop keeping track of the weeks and just say takeaways for the week of this week or some other way of phrasing it. But yeah, I am going to start with Tyrese Maxey. I did that breakdown on him. I've been feeling this way for a while, Sam. I kind of loosely brought it up in terms of this Maxey Edgecombe backcourt, but I really want to keep the focus on Maxey. And we can talk about VJ and Grimes and McCain and the rest of the roster. And we can talk about Paul George and everything else. But I think my biggest takeaway watching him throughout his entire career, but then 15 games this year, is build around this man. And this is where Philly is, I don't want to say lucky, like they're not lucky that they have him, but not many teams can have these high-priced veterans on their roster that you're not getting anywhere close to what you're paying them in terms of production, and also have somebody like Maxey who can say, let's build around this guy. And so I think part of me was, okay, can we hash out what does that mean? What does that mean for Paul George? What does that mean for Joel Embiid? What does it mean for the rest of the roster, etc.? But also giving Maxey his flowers. And I broke it down in that video where he is so hard to defend because I call it the 4th level. I'm not the first person to call it that. He can shoot from distance from the 3-point
like 30 feet out, not like, just like you're 23 feet and
correct. He can shoot from there, which puts so much pressure on the defense, combined with his speed, combined with, in that breakdown, I showed him making floaters with both hands from different areas of the floor. He can get all the way to the rim. I did highlight, I'm interested to see where the passing ends up going because he's going to start to get so much attention. Some of his numbers are a touch inflated because he does play more than 40 minutes a night. But my argument right now to that is he's playing 40 minutes a night while taking more than 23 attempts. He's doing it on efficiency. He's getting to the free throw line. And quite frankly, Sam, I think he plays hard defensively. Nobody is going to call him a good defender or anything like that, but he competes and gives real effort. So that is my pitch for Tyrese Maxey. And my pitch to that front office is, this is your guy. Every decision moving forward should be around what is best for him the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And look, like, he's not James Harden. They're very different in terms of the way they went about attacking defenses and everything. But Daryl Morey, assuming this front office sticks around for a while, and look, I understand they're under some pressure, but like they probably whiffed on the Embiid extension and the Paul George deal, but I can't imagine that the Joel extension wasn't an ownership situation on some level. I'm not sitting here saying that, that front office and Daryl and those guys like didn't decide to give him the extension, but when you're talking about your superstar player and you're giving an extension, that's an ownership decision as much as it's a front office decision, especially when it's somebody who has been as injured as Joel Embiid has. But I agree with you. Like, Maxey is their guy moving forward. And the thing that is real about Maxey this year is that we're seeing real superstar impact in terms of even like the on-off numbers, right? So when Maxey's on the court, they outscore their opponent by 5.2 points per 100 possessions. They have a 121 offensive rating. When Maxey is off the court, their offense falls off of a cliff. It's only a 106.3 offensive rating, and they are getting outscored by 11.4 points per 100 possessions. That, once you start getting into that like 15 to 16 to 20 point differential on your on-off numbers, that's where we really start to like climb into, this is a like superstar territory. And everything I've seen from Maxey is very real. He's just very hard to guard is the reality, because he can shoot from 30 feet, because he has a lot of the crazy touch and, left hand, left foot gathers and these crazy like scoop shots high off the glass. And you mentioned the floaters. Like, the floaters are the thing that he's always had. Going back to seeing him for the first time playing for RM5 on the AAU circuit, you know what I mean? Like, the floater game was always what was so impressive to me, and that has maintained. He's gotten to the NBA, but it's the speed. at the end of the day. Like the fact that you have to guard him as a shooter, and then he's also one of the fastest players in the NBA who has a very tight handle. It's just impossible to guard on some level. And, look, these guys are not super easy to find. Right now, he has 8 assists per game versus 2.8 turnovers per game. I wouldn't say that Maxey is out here like dishing out the craziest, highest level reads in the world. But you know what? When you're that fast and you at least just understand where the defense is helping from in order to try to counteract your speed in some way, you don't need to really. You don't have to do that. So like, now the thing is that you brought up the idea of wanting to talk about like how to build around him, right?
Can I just
yeah, go ahead.
Just want to finish off the pitch rule. He's second in the league in points per game. I again mentioned the minutes per game, which is a factor. He's taking the most field goal attempts, but when you look at efficiency, it's right there with Luka. It's better than Cade. It's right there with Brunson. He takes the 5th most 3-point attempts. Again, he shoots the best percentage of just about any of these guys on high volume 3-point attempts. And then the last thing, and this will lead into what we're going to talk about in terms of building around him. This team is 9-7 right now at time of recording. That's with 6 games from Joel Embiid playing 23 minutes, 2 from Paul George playing 23 minutes. His starting center over recently has been Andre Drummond. His starting backcourt mate, as good as he's been, is a rookie in VJ Edgecombe. Oubre's missed a few games. It's not like he's pulled them to a 9-7 record with the best supporting cast in the NBA. And so I think that's what has me just so impressed with what he's doing right now, along with just, again, it's not like this is the first time we've seen it. You know what I mean? It's not a small sample based off what we've seen in previous seasons and in previous playoff runs from him as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. And the idea of how to build around him, right? So the first thing is that I think VJ Edgecombe is like a perfect partner for him, first and foremost. So the big thing worth noting here is that they are additive to one another. So when Maxey is on the court with Edgecombe, the 76ers beat their opponents by 7.9 points per 100 possessions. When Maxey is on the court without Edgecombe, they actually lose their minutes by 1.9 points per 100 possessions, which says to me that like, okay, Edgecombe's defensive ability, his ability to knock down shots, his athleticism, all of that stuff has been very additive to what Maxey has brought to the table as a creator, as a speedy downhill driver, trying to get some space to operate. Like all of that is super, super valuable, right? So I think Edgecombe is the perfect partner, running partner for him long-term is the reality. So that's a start. How do you build from there? Well, you have to find guys that are big is the reality. You have to find guys with some size who are skilled and who can do some things. Now, we've talked about the Joel problem already, and I do think it's a problem. I don't really think he's movable is the reality. I would love to if I was them. I would love to find a way to get off of that contract. I just don't see it as a thing that they're going to be able to accomplish anytime soon. Look, like he played last like 2 weeks ago. He's dealing with this knee inflammation stuff, whatever it is, right? He has played 6 games this year. I felt like the 6 games were not particularly good, to be honest with you. I know that in those 6 games, he's averaging 20 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, but it was so perimeter oriented. Everything was just like, oh my God, like I have to pick and pop. I have to pick and short roll and stay above the foul line. I'm taking a lot of jump shots. And then defensively, like he just had no speed whatsoever to be able to deal with anybody, it felt like to me. So I almost think the first thing I would look for if I was them is like a big, probably like because that's where I feel like they're kind of hemorrhaging points right now, especially when Joel is out. The Drummond thing, like I respect the fact that Andre Drummond, works hard and has had a nice career, but he's just not in any way an offensive player that teams are worried about. And defensively, he is extremely limited at this point. I mean, like, honestly, I would be interested in seeing Janai Broom at a certain point, just because I would be interested in seeing it. Adem Bona is like a limited minutes defensive energy guy who can only do so much on offense because the touch is not great and his feel is not great on that end. The defense has been up and down too, depending on the night and depending on the matchup. So if I'm them, like I'm trying to find a big, what does that look like? It's hard to say. They're in between a rock and a hard place is the reality because of the Joel deal and because of the George deal. If they could find a way out of the George deal, I think it becomes like a little bit easier. If any team was willing to take that, like if the Kings were willing to do some weird, like Sabonis for George deal where the Sixers send back an asset or something, maybe I would hear that out. Like if you could find a way to take advantage of one of these bad front offices to move Paul George to, that would probably be my like number one move, I think, just because I don't know that George fits the timeline of what they're building at this point. I think their most exciting players have been their young guys so far, but it's easier said than done, I think, is the reality. And Paul George still has 2 years left after this one, so it's not like he's an expiring next year. I think this is going to be a really, really hard kind of situation to manage.
That's where I'm at is like, I agree with you on Edgecombe. I think Quentin Grimes been good this year. Oubre's been good whenever he's been, like I say, he's missed a few games now. I like Justin Edwards on the wing. I think he's a really good just rotation wing. Obviously, Jared McCain is just kind of working himself back into it. I don't know how long it'll take him to get back to what we saw last year and all of that. May take him the entire year. Who knows? But I like kind of the guard wing group of all of that. It's just like, because where I drift to sometimes, Sam, is can they survive? Like, what if I told you Paul George and Joel Embiid would give you 55 games at 25 minutes in those 55 games? Is that enough to be exciting for this team overall? Because like I've watched both Paul George
at the level they're currently playing at. No, it's not.
So that's because I've watched the two Paul George games and I found myself thinking he looks better than what he looked last year, at least. Like he's shooting, but he's making threes. He provides them some scoring that they need in those minutes. And even I know Embiid's not anywhere close to what, we've come accustomed to loving about him on either end of the floor, and they're not going to come close to matching the salaries. But if it was over the next couple of years and VJ takes a step and you somehow bring back Grimes, like I don't even know if that's plausible or possible or what the relationship is there after how it all went out. With the current guard wing group, could you make this work with 55 games and 25 minutes a night from Embiid and George? Like, is that all of a sudden, you don't think that's enough for them to be a real contender in the East?
No, because the more that I do this, and we're going to talk about this in my first takeaway that we're going to go to right after this. The more that I do this, I find a lot of value in the consistency of having guys around and being able to build with players one night after the next and being able to rely on guys. Like, I don't know this. I would imagine it's quite difficult in the 76ers locker room, not knowing when Joel is coming back, not knowing, is Paul going to go tonight? Is he not playing tonight? Right. And I'm sure that stuff is communicated, day of, and they get a chance to wrap their heads around it and everything. But if you can't rely on your best players, I think it becomes very difficult, I think is what I would say. And I just don't know how, if you're the 76ers, you can rely on Joel Embiid at any point right now. And that goes for any other team that would be acquiring him. And it's the knee. It's nothing against Joel personally. It's just the fact that his knee is seemingly in a really, precarious position for him to play night after night in the NBA. And Paul George, it's nothing against his game. I think I've long been one of the preeminent, Paul George, fans in the NBA media. Like, I think that dude's stud, and I love his two-way game. He is unfortunately also going to turn 36 here in May when the playoffs like really get going. So I just don't know how you can really contend at a high level when that's your situation.
I find myself sometimes like, is Maxey good enough? Will VJ be good enough the next couple of years? Is this guard perimeter rotation good enough that even though these two guys are going to be severely overpaid, can you still make it work? Because those guys are still talented and can provide you value in some capacity. I think I'm with you though, in terms of the consistency of how that would change everybody's role night in and night out would be so frustrating. And it would just be, I don't know, watching the Pacers last year, watching what the Pistons have done through how many ever games this year, I find consistency and chemistry, watching what the Thunder do. So I'm not a homer here.
Yeah.
I find consistency and chemistry, who we will talk about them later, such an important and undervalued part of even the NBA. And I think we talk about that in college. You talk about that with high school teams, below the professional level. I think there's a level of it at the professional level as well. And even if you could guarantee me, which I don't think is a guarantee, that those guys could play that number of games and number of minutes, you're right. Like it would be such in flux night in, night out for the rest of the roster. It's hard to imagine they could compete at the highest of levels. I just thought that would be the easiest path moving forward, not having to try to move them and reshake the roster. Because I don't know how they're going to do that, Sam. I don't know how they're going to get rid of these guys and open up cap space or, acquire players that are available night in and night out.
To me, it's why Kelly Oubre is still on this roster, because Kelly can at least come in and give you some like ability to get through screens defensively. And he's a scorer. Right? Like he's an NBA player for sure. Right. It's why Quentin Grimes is still on this roster. Like he is definitely an NBA player. Like these guys are useful for them. And it's just that they're limited in terms of what they can go out and acquire. And speaking to the consistency point, like, look, there's a reason the Raptors, like all four of their starters outside of Pirtle. So, Barnes, Ingram, Barrett, and quickly, like all those guys have started all 16 games this year, and Pirtle missed the 4 games, but then Colin Murray-Boyles just comes in, and then Jamal Shead has played all 16, right? You look at the Nuggets, Jamal Murray's missed 1 game, and I think Cam Johnson has missed a game, but Jokic has played all 16, and then Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown, like they played every game up until the point where their injuries happened. And all of Peyton Watson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, and Jonas Valanciunas, they've played every game this year. Like there is a real value to consistency night in, night out in the NBA. And I don't think we put enough of a premium on it. And we will get to that in my first takeaway here of the day. But before we do that, we got to shout out our friends over at CashApp. The holidays are all about finding the perfect gift, but this time of year, not every deal is actually what it seems. Scammers are getting more creative to trick people into sharing their payment info through methods like fake shopping sites and giveaways that are too good to be true. Luckily, Cash App's 24/7 fraud monitoring helps detect and alert you to unusual card activity should someone gain access to your card, so you can act fast if something seems off. You can also lock or unlock your Cash App card instantly right in the app for extra control and peace of mind. Stay one step ahead of scams this season and keep your money secure with Cash App. For a limited time only, new Cash App customers can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash for real. Just download Cash App, use our exclusive referral code SECURE10. That's SECURE10 in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid credit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Promotions provided by Cash App, a Block Incorporated brand. Visit Cash App or cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures. We're also going to shout out our friends over at Nutrafol. If you're dealing with hair issues like thinning or shedding, but feel totally stuck on what to try next, there are so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's exactly why Nutrafol is worth a closer look. It's not just hype. It's physician formulated. It's clinically tested and even recommended by dermatologists. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. In fact, trusted by over 1.5 million people. You can feel great about what you're putting into your body since Nutrafol hair growth supplements are backed by peer-reviewed studies and they are NSF Contents certified, the gold standard in third-party certification for supplements. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code Game Theory. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code Game Theory. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code Game Theory. Okay, Bryce, my first takeaway is that I think at some point here, it might not be by the deadline. It might not be till the summer. It might not be till next deadline. But at some point, Zion Williamson is probably going to have to go in New Orleans in order to make room for Derek Queen. Derek Queen has been awesome recently on offense, and I am very interested to see what he can become, and we'll talk about Derek Queen in a second. But B, it just feels like it's kind of time for Zion to me in New Orleans. And again, this speaks to what we were talking about earlier in regard to just being able to rely on people. Zion Williamson has played 7 games this season, right? I think it is very challenging to build a roster around a player. And I think with Zion, you kind of do have to build around him in some respect because of his limitations, despite his immense talents. It is very difficult to build around a player that you can't trust to be in the lineup consistently. And unfortunately, Zion at this point just has not shown the ability to consistently be in the lineup with any sort of regularity. On top of that, I think Derek Queen is just actually good. And I am excited to talk about that. But even beyond that, so there's a moment in the Dallas game over the weekend near the end, 30 seconds or so left. I think it was Derek Queen who went for like a weird gamble to try and get the ball out of Cooper's hands. Think that New Orleans is up 2 with maybe 45 seconds left coming down the court. And Queen goes for this gamble. And because of that, Zion has to kind of help over, or like kind of inch over a little bit and go away from Najee Marshall. Cooper sees Najee Marshall get wide open from beyond the 3-point line. And Zion is like probably 12 feet away from him. Let's call it maybe 11 feet away from him. It's a long closeout. Cooper gets the pass to Najee, 1 pass away. And instead of closing out, like, and trying to stop Najee from making this 3, Zion just takes like a couple of hop steps, puts his arm up half-heartedly, and doesn't really actually get the contest. And I wish I could say that that was the only time in the game that he had done that, but it wasn't. It just wasn't. So, you know, you can go back and you can look, like, he has a really, really lazy closeout at 11:17 in the second quarter. He has a really bad closeout at 11:15 of the third quarter on a Cooper flag potential shot, and Cooper just like flies by to score. Like, there were a ton of these moments where, unfortunately, like, I just didn't think that the effort and energy defensively was there. And look, second game back for Zion, second game in 3rd nights. I don't want to sit here and act like this is like an unconscionable, unforgivable moment, right? But these are the things that I really continue to struggle with Zion. And we're not at the point where he is, 21, 22 anymore, and he's still figuring it out. Like Derek Queen, we're going to talk about Derek Queen's defense. I have a lot of concerns, but Derek Queen is 20 years old, and Derek Queen is figuring things out. He's a rookie who missed a lot of his training camp, or missed all of training camp really, with a broken elbow, and missed a lot of summer league after breaking his elbow, I believe it was, or maybe his forearm. I forget exactly what the exact injury was, but I think he deserves a lot more grace and leeway defensively than what Zion Williamson does, where Zion, we are now in year 7, but even say that he missed all of 21, 22 with injury, at least year 6. That's just like some of the stuff Zion does is just not good enough in terms of energy. And anybody that's like, oh, I'm sure he was daring Najee Marshall to shoot. Guys, there's 30 seconds left in the game. That's completely ridiculous. The one thing that you can't give up is an open 3. That is the reality, because that's how you lose the game. If you give up a 2 and it's tied and you get a chance to go down and win the game and then you go to overtime, it's cool. There is not a coach in the world that is going to be like, oh yeah, we're good just daring Najee to shoot with 30 seconds left in the game. That's not the way that this works in the end of game situations. I think that the Pelicans should probably be looking to move off of the Zion situation anyway, but the emergence of Derek Queen, who we will talk about here after I give you a chance to speak, or maybe during your chance to speak here, I think gives them reason to really look to explore this now, because Derek has looked very good offensively, and I don't think that those two can play together. I do not think that you can have two guys that have north-south defensive deficiencies in the same lineup together and have any chance to defend at a reasonable level. That's just kind of my take on NBA defense. And I think that both those guys have real north-south question marks on defense. And if I'm the Pelicans, I have 4 years of a rookie scale contract on Derek Queen, and it gives me way more time to try and build in a functional, flexible manner than what I have left with Zion Williamson's contract. So if I'm them, I am really starting to explore the idea of moving Zion Williamson, and Derek Queen's emergence has been a big reason why.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, we're going to talk about Derek Queen. He's been incredible. I think he's the main name whenever we talk about this. I also want to say, Jeremiah Fears has looked good through his early portion of the season, 17 games. Obviously, having Trey Murphy here, Herb Jones, all to different extents. I think for me, there is a collection of young talent. And I know it's more of like the direct, can Queen and Zion play together? I realize that's the point you're making. But for me, there is a collection of young talent here that, for all of the crap that we gave this front office for the draft last year, and we can always rehash the process of what they did. And I think it's too early to be taking victory laps one way or the other. We'll
talk about that. Yeah. In a second. I think that's interesting.
Yes. But you also have, like I say, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, all of that. I think that stuff in general for me would make me, okay, I can feel good. Even if I don't have Zion Williamson, I have these names that I can feel good about building around. And you've invested a lot of assets and time and resources into this group. And if you think especially they can all play together, that is, exciting or energetic or whatever for the organization. Obviously, Queen is at the forefront of that, and the one that is the biggest talking point with Zion. I will say that I watched a game recently, and it seemed like they were playing through Queen a little bit. It didn't seem like they were force feeding Williamson the ball. And I was okay with it. It was like, okay, this is fine. Yeah. Queen's just kind of, Zion's just kind of having a fine game. He's not taking touches away from Queen or Murphy or anything like that. I think it was the Nuggets game. He ended up with only 13 attempts, field goal attempts, 14. But is that what Zion wants? And then if that's what his role is going to be, then do you want to deal with the defensive limitations that come with that, right? And I think that's to your point is if you're going to play through Queen, through Jeremiah Fears, through Trey Murphy, and you're not playing through Williamson, then why are we dealing with the lack of impact in other areas, including rebounding and defense? I went back through my notes and it was from a Spurs game earlier in the year. And I mentioned that he was active early in the game. And then I also directly mentioned after that, gives some of the worst effort you imagine, and that he just gives up on plays too easily. So this wasn't an isolated incident is my point here. This goes back to earlier in the season, earlier in Zion's career. The one thing I will say is I want to throw two things at you. One, I looked up their net. Do you know what their net rating together actually is right now? Zion and Derek Queen, if you do just the 2-player lineup?
I don't.
It's 16.2 positive. 16.2, which is crazy. I would not have guessed that. I do wonder if I would hold on to Zion throughout this year, just so you're not thrusting too much on Queen and Fears and those guys as rookies, and still have his gravity, what he does offensively for the rest of this year at least. And then maybe move him in the offseason, depending on what the offers could be and what the demand is and all of that. Because I don't want too much thrown at those guys early on in their rookie years. What they're doing right now is great. Queen looks like maybe he's ready for it, and maybe he is. Maybe that shouldn't be a concern, but that would be just a little thing for me in terms of, do you move him at the deadline or wait till the offseason?
Yeah. I would imagine that a pretty significant percentage of those minutes, I have 76 minutes here that those two have played together. I would imagine a pretty large percentage of those minutes have come against Dallas. And then probably, I would guess in the game against San Antonio earlier in the year as well, if you made me kind of guess where those minutes come from. Where Queen was quite good in that San Antonio game as well. But I do want to talk about Derek Queen here. It looked like part of the reason that those numbers are so high is that they're at a 132 offensive rating.
The offensive rating is absolutely carrying that. I mean, the defensive rating isn't catastrophic, but it's not like it's good. The offensive rating is what makes the overall net so impressive right now.
And the big thing is they're shooting 42% from three in those minutes. So it's a little bit aberrant in terms of 3-point shooting, given the fact that it's a lot of those minutes are coming with Jeremiah Fears, Derek Queen, Zion Williamson on the court all together at once. Right. So not ideal in terms of shooting. So I guess that, we're looking at some aberrant numbers here with those guys. With Queen though, I do just want to bring up. So in his last 11 games, Derek Queen, 15.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.9 assists, 3.3 turnovers, shooting 50, 15, 78. They've lost 9 in a row in that time. So I'm not going to sit here and say that they're really good or anything, or this is working or anything. But man, some of the stuff that Derek Queen did in that game against the Mavericks was pretty insane. The way that he processes the game is just completely absurd. In a split second, he recognizes that Trey Murphy has a switch onto Brandon Williams and throws this lob that is so perfectly timed for Trey off of a 45 cut. He throws it right over Brandon Williams' left shoulder while Williams has his back turned. And Murphy catches it all in one motion and goes up and finishes for an alley-oop lay-in. It was kind of unbelievable, honestly. He runs DHOs incredibly well. I think he's making life easier for Jeremiah Fears when he's out there. I think that the ability to initiate from the high post has been really, really valuable. Certainly from the top of the key. He had another pass in transition where he led the break and then threw this disgusting behind the back, perfectly on target, in rhythm for Trey Murphy to catch it and slam. He does things that are just different out on the court offensively. And I have so many worries defensively. The way that they're covering for him on defense is so real. There's one possession that I called out on Twitter where it's like they're trying to pre-switch a Spain action, and like you can call that guard to guard switching a Spain action, whatever you want to call it, right? But it feels like it was a little bit more like ad hoc than just a guard to guard switch. And because of that, like Herb Jones has to like grab Max Christie as he's going up to go and get to the 3-point line. And then Fears doesn't know that they're guard to guard switching. And Herb's like trying to yell to him to guard switch. And Fears is like going over the screen. Like Max Christie just ends up wide open because they're worried about covering for Queen and trying to stop him from getting north south. The thing with Queen, and this is something I wrote in the draft guide too, and we've seen it early, he's actually pretty okay laterally. He is not good if you get him north south and he has to like close out onto shooters and has to get to pick and pop guys and everything like that. I think that it was funny, like early on in that game when the Pelicans got out to a lead against Dallas, they kind of just switched everything with him and it worked a little bit better for me. And you're not going to be able to do that against every team because, like, for instance, we talked about Tyrese Maxey a second ago. Derek Queen can't guard Tyrese Maxey in space. Like if that's the matchup, it's dead. And that's the same for any other big in the league, probably, other than like 5 or 6 of them, like Bam and Chet and those guys, right? So I don't mean to like call out Queen specifically in that regard, but I do think they're doing a lot to stop him from getting north-south defensively. And that is interesting, but I think there are certain matchups where he can be okay. I do worry about the pressure he's going to put on a team defensively that tries to build around him. But I also think he's just really smart and intuitive in like a lot of the ways that he operates, even on that end of the court. And he does make plays with his hands. Like his hand-eye coordination is very real. So if I'm them, I think I am exploring where this goes. And people have brought up the idea of process versus results for this with Derek Queen and everything. And trading the 2026 first rounder for Queen in addition to 22 or 23, whatever the pick was.
Which they traded the Pacers pick to them for that pick. Like all of that stuff
right.
flowed in together.
And look, I think the process of that is poor. And the reason I think the process of that is poor is because I had Derek Queen at like 11 or 12 on my board. Right. And that's how I evaluated Queen. But what I will say is this. If the Pelicans had Derek Queen at like 4th or 5th on their board or something like that, and they decided that they needed this guy because they saw it as like a real value, I do think that the results of the Queen evaluation matter in regard to this. Because if they just got Derek Queen right and got him more right than everybody else, that is a real thing. And look, again, they're 2-15 and they're tracking toward that pick being a top 4 pick that they give up, right? And that is really bad and concerning and everything. But I think we often think of process versus results in regard to like what the consensus is of the process, right? But if they had Derek Queen as, their 4th overall prospect or something like that, I don't know where they had Derek Queen. I'm just saying, like, say that their board was Cooper, Dylan Harper, Jeremiah Fears, Derek Queen. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just like kind of spitballing, right? Then trading, what might be number 1, number 4, number 5. Let's say it's number 5 is what you thought was your most likely pick. Trading number 5 and number 23 for number 4 is like not a crazy process. You know what I mean? The problem is that you have to account for the upside of the pick in some way, shape, or form that could turn into 1, 2, or 3 in a class with AJ Debinca, Cam Boozer, Cooper, Darren Peterson. I'm sorry. And the 30%, the 35, 40% chance of that happening is something you really have to account for in the trade. And that's why ultimately I struggle with the process of the trade, even if you did have Derek Queen at number 4. And I think that it was still slightly off, but it makes it a lot more palatable if you just evaluated Derek Queen way better than everybody else did in the league.
And I think it's possible he was that high. And obviously these guys are very different players, but my understanding was that they had, and when I say they, I'm talking about Troy Weaver, I guess, when he was in Detroit, he had Jalen Duren, I would guess, higher than anybody else on his draft board. And my understanding is if Jaden Ivey would have been selected by the Sacramento Kings, Jalen Duren was very much in play at 5 for the Pistons, which would have been, I don't know if that would have been a bigger.
For what it's worth, I think I wrote that at the time too.
Okay.
So I think that you're fine to say that.
You and I didn't know each other then. So this is coming from completely different situations. But anyway, listen, we don't need to get into the Troy Weaver conversation right now and the history of his draft picks and all of that. But I mean, he has hit on some. At the end of the day, whenever I talk about that over there, I try to at least give him a little bit of flowers for some of the picks he has made. Because
Troy's problem has never been evaluating players. It's building a roster.
And so, so that's what I was about to say. Everything you just said about Queen terrifies me because, and this is one thing we said about Derek Queen on draft night. We crushed the process of that move, or I did. I shouldn't put words in your mouth. But we showed Derek Queen love on draft night and through the draft process.
Yeah, we did.
It was, is this where we want Derek Queen to be? That was, I think, our biggest takeaway was, is this the right spot for Derek Queen? And everything you just said about him, I agree with. It's funny that I've actually been most impressed with the way he scores the basketball and the cadence of his drives and how he throws defenders off and all of that, along with the passing. But real quick, they have to put the right guy next to him, Sam. I think this can really work if you put the right front court guy next to him, whether that's a true center and he plays the quote unquote 4, or it's a 4-man with a little more size. It doesn't matter. He's a big. Put another big that makes sense next to him. And then you can have real size. And if you find that guy that does what he doesn't do defensively and maybe can space the floor, and that's not easy to find, or whatever. Like if you find the complementary big to play next to him, this could be really exciting and this could really work. And the one thing I do want to say about his defense, he is active. He's averaging almost 2.5 stocks over his last 11 games. So because of how smart he is and active hands and those things, he is able to be a little bit disruptive, at least on the defensive end.
Yeah. The scoring is interesting because there are moments where he will just like flail one at the rim that is really ugly. And it is Şenguni on some level where like there are some finishing concerns there because he's not overly bouncy and it's a lot of touch finishing. And you're just at the NBA center position. You are surrounded by some of the biggest, strongest, longest dudes that you will find across planet Earth. Right. And it is very difficult, I think, sometimes to score at the rim if you have to rely on touch shots very consistently at the rim. Also, he's very good at those touch shots, right? So it's like a balance of trying to find, okay, if we space the court a little bit better around him, i.e. like not playing him with Zion all the time so that, you know, his guy is digging off of him to try and get to Queen because he's spacing 18 feet away. Like there are a lot of different ways to make this work. And I'm not even sitting here saying that like I think Derek Queen is a surefire all-star. I don't know what Derek Queen is yet, but I think that Derek Queen gives them some cover right now to explore the Zion market is the reality and see what that looks like. And I don't know that I really want to like get into like fake trades and everything because like it's I don't know what that looks like, right? We'll see what it does look like, but if I was them, I would be looking into this like pretty substantially because I don't think that those two work together in any way.
Because the other thing I'm interested to see is when the scouting report gets out on Queen, does that change things? I'm not saying all of a sudden his points per game will be cut in half, but the first time you see something, especially as unique as what Derek Queen is, it can be hard to defend it. So what happens the next time we go around? Like, I don't know baseball very well, but it seems like this is true with a pitcher, right? Like the first time you go through the lineup and then it's, I imagine it's way harder the second time through the lineup because now they have a beat for the pace of his throws and the pitches, not pitches.
For that reason, And MLB teams are essentially not letting starters, unless you're like elite of the elite starter or you have a no hitter, go through a lineup the third time.
Yeah,
it is the way that baseball analytics are taking the game.
And so again, maybe Queen figures it out because, right, like maybe there's counters here that as soon as they start to take their stuff away. My final point with him specifically is he is stronger than what I realized. He bumped Jokic in that game against the Nuggets, and Jokic is massive. Listen, Jokic had a little bit of a I'm going to only take so many steps on defensive game, but just the strength that Queen had to move him off the cutoff point was impressive. So no, I'm with you. I think the Pelicans might be in the market to be out of the Zion business and just kind of go in with this young group of guys that I kind of like individually.
I love it. Okay, Bryce, you are up with takeaway number 2 for you, number 3 overall.
In the spirit of our producer and leader, GMAC, let's talk the New York Knicks. We have talked about the conference leading Detroit Pistons. We've talked about the Toronto Raptors. We talked about the Atlanta Hawks, all rightfully so, Sam. We should be talking about those teams because they have played incredibly well. And rightfully so, I think we haven't purposely steered away from, but we haven't talked a lot about the Cavaliers or the Knicks or anything like that.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking about it, I was like, I've heard some podcasts talk about the Knicks and people talk about and tweet about the Knicks and the depth that they have and how good Shamet has looked, although he dislocated his shoulder, it sounds like on Saturday night. We'll see what comes of that. And Jordan Clarkson, and I love the Yabusele move and all of that. And so my question is, Sam, do they have playoff depth? This is all fine right now. Like Shamet averaging double digits and Clarkson averaging double digits. I guess Shamet dropped below that, not finishing that game. But are they going to have any more depth in this year's playoffs than what they had last year? How many players do we trust in the playoffs in this rotation? And if they don't, what can they do about it? And so I guess my thought was, can we divide this into 2 conversations? Do we trust anything in the backcourt? I have a feeling that you're going to trust a player that I don't trust as much. Although I did think he performed well in that game that I assume he probably didn't think he was going to play in. And then do either of us trust their front court, which I will just bury the lead and say they need some real depth there, because I absolutely do not, based off how Yabusele has played so far this year. And I realize they're load managing Mitchell Robinson, but as I told GMAC, you're telling me he's not going to play back-to-backs. He's going to play less than 20 minutes a night, and then he's going to go through a deep playoff run and give you 25 to 30 a night that you would need. I just don't believe that that's going to actually happen. So I don't know if you want to break it up backcourt and front court, but that was my thought, because I do think it's 2 different conversations.
Sure. So like Bridges, Brunson, Anunoby, Hart, McBride. Like we trust those guys, right? In the playoffs.
Correct.
Shamet, like I don't, to be honest with you, because I don't think he can guard.
So he was almost he was the hinge point for me of, do I trust Shamet, Clarkson, Kolek? Do I trust none of them? Is there one I do? So
here's the reason I don't trust him. It's because teams are already going to be pretty aggressive in hunting the Jalen Brunson, Karl Towns ball screen, right? The problem is that with Shamet, you have another guy out there to hunt. Like, I think that if you're going to have Brunson out there, you really can't have anybody else out there you can hunt defensively, is my issue. Now, like if Shamet is out there with a bench unit and you have other guys and you're kind of staggering lineups, or you're letting, Deuce kind of run the show with OG and McHale, and you're giving Jalen like a bit of a blow, then Shamet is probably workable on the court. But I don't think that Shamet is workable in a playoff setting with Jalen Brunson on the court, because I think it's a little bit too easy to attack. And I feel the same way about Clarkson as well, to be honest with you. So, and for what it's worth, like I think you assume that I'm going to say I trust Kolek. I don't trust Kolek in the playoffs right now.
So this is my point, though. How many guys did you name? 5? Brunson, Bridges,
4, I think. Well, yeah.
Hart, McBride, 5
guys at the top. Yeah.
Yeah. While I trust all of those guys, 5's great, but that's an issue if it's only 5. when we get to the front court, because what somebody may say is, well, OG can play minutes at the 4, which is true. Or Josh Hart could be quote unquote the 4, which is true. But if you're already down to 5 in the backcourt, the wing, then how many minutes can you steal for those guys in the front court if you don't trust any of the 3 that we've talked about right here? And this is my thing with Kolek. I think he's a hooper. Like, I think he comes in and he's tough. He came in that game. Who did I watch him play from Saturday night? The Magic in a game that they lost. But he comes in and he like creates second chance opportunities and he gets to the free throw line and all that. He hasn't shot it well from 3 so far in his career, Sam. And like, he needs to be able to knock down shots. And that's why I thought you may push back and just go, no, Bryce, I trust him to make shots, or, be tough defensively.
I don't know if I trust him to guard is the reality.
And that's where I was like, which of those 3 guys can you trust throughout a series? And so that's why I thought it was an interesting conversation. And I was interested to see if you, I wasn't going to say push back, but if you would have different thoughts on the depth than what I do. And I thought if you did anywhere, it would be this conversation that maybe you trusted one of these guys in the backcourt.
No, I'm fairly concerned about the Knicks. And here's the other thing about the Knicks too. Like they are not guarding. And I know that like the Orlando game is like totally different because OG was out, but why in the world are you switching everything with OG and Anunoby out of the lineup? Like, what in the world was that against Orlando?
Franz just had a field day, man. Like, I will tell you this.
It was Bane too. Like,
well, yeah, all of them. But I'm like, here's the thing, though. They had to start the game with Mitch Rob guarding Franz because of the lineup they had on the court. And you can't put Towns. You had nobody else to even think about guarding him. I don't want to be worried about them. But I am like a big picture. Like, they're going to win plenty of games in the regular season. Brunson's awesome, like all of that. But if we're judging them on winning a title, which I think is fairly for not getting to the finals, which I think is fair for us to analyze them on based on the moves they've made and how they put this roster together, I have concerns. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have similar concerns is the reality. Like, again, I don't want to like over analyze the last like week or so of Knicks basketball because without Anunoby, like it's just a totally different team, right? Like they just don't really have the ability to guard without Anunoby. Like they have no chance. But part of the problem here without OG is that I know he played 74 games last year, but you kind of have to account that you're going to spend some time without OG throughout the course of a season. In his career, he played 50 games in 2024, 67 in 2023, 48 in 2022, 43 in 2021, and then 69 and 67 the 2 years prior. Like, he's going to miss somewhere between 15 and 25 games in all likelihood throughout the course of a year. And you just hope that you get a good year where he misses more like 10 to 15 and you get really lucky, right? But obviously, so far, he's missed what is it? 4 games so far, something like that. I know he's been out for like a week is what's happening. But yeah, like I have worries. I have all the same worries that you do, but it's a roster construction worry in the same way that I have a roster construction worry with the Cavs, where I don't think the moves that they made in the offseason went to solve the biggest issue for them, which is how do we handle when teams just relentlessly attack the Towns Brunson ball screens? Because at the end of the day, like they're still in a mode where they're just trusting the Mitch Rob lineups at center. And I think it's reasonable to say like, yeah, we're just going to play Mitch at 5 and that's how we're going to shut down that action particularly. But do we think that they can do that? Like, do we think that Mitch is going to be healthy in the playoffs? Do they have a backup option to it? Like, I don't know about you. I didn't love the DOR minutes yesterday.
No,
I love Ariel Hookporty, but I don't think Ariel Hookporty is ready for that much pressure in a playoff series. Yabusele has been a train wreck on defense. I feel like so
hand
far.
up. I thought it was a great move. Like I will carry my own receipts. People know that. I thought it was going to be a great move for them to bring in Yabusele after what he did in Philly last year, and it has not played out that way whatsoever so far.
You know the funny thing is though, and this is completely 3-point variance.
He has the best defensive rating on the team.
Yeah, they have a 103 defensive rating when Yabusele is on the court, but it's because teams are shooting 27%, or teams are shooting 30% from three when he's on the court is why. So it's, like I feel like he gets cooked every single time when I watch them play.
My worry, and so I think we're in the same place with the front court, is you're just so reliant on Mitchell Robinson, and that's okay. Because this isn't like shade at Mitchell Robinson. I think Mitchell Robinson's good. But if the answer to all of these questions, I think there's another answer to the question, which I want to ask before we move on. But even if Mitchell Robinson is the answer, Sam, he can't play enough minutes to be the answer, I guess. Like in his career, 22 minutes per game in the playoffs. That means there's 26 other minutes where whoever you're playing against is still going to relentlessly attack you. And this is a guy who played 31 games a couple years ago, only played 17 games last year, even though he did come in, and then play in the playoffs. I just don't know how you can say that's our answer when you can't trust him to play more than 20 minutes a night. So here's my final question on it then, because I feel like we've been negative, and I didn't want it to be fully negative because I want Knicks fans to hear me. This isn't like they suck. This isn't like they're going to miss the playoffs.
No,
this is evaluating
a top 3 seed in the East,
correct,
for sure.
Like this is evaluating them at the highest level based off what we've seen so far. Can the offense just be that good, Sam? Because I do think the offense is better. I like some of the actions they're running and the flow, how they're using Brunson off the ball. I like how Mikal Bridges is playing this year. I love OG Anunoby. Can the offense just be good enough, and then the defense be top middle of the pack? Can that be enough, especially in the East? I don't think you're beating the Thunder, Rockets, Nuggets in the finals or whoever.
Yeah.
But can you be good enough in the East by just being better than everybody else offensively?
My answer to that is I think that Cat would really have to be dominant to make that work. Like I have full faith in Brunson to be that level that they need. I think that if you're going to make it work playing that game, Karl Anthony Towns would have to be like very dominant to be like a true mismatch nightmare that is taking guys down on the block and scoring, in addition to trying to knock down threes in the way that he has so far this year, where he's taking 6 threes a game. He's just not making them at a super high level. That'll change. He's one of the best shooting bigs that has ever lived. So I'm not worried about him making shots. I would like to see him continue to just bludgeon mismatches on some level too. And I feel like he hasn't done that consistently throughout the year. He's had a couple flashes, but it hasn't been wildly consistent game after game after game from him. And on defense too, it hasn't been wildly consistent game after game from him this year. But the game against Miami where he had 39 and they ended up winning that game by 8. That was a week and a half ago, something like that. That was the Cat that I think you would need in the playoffs if you're going to rely on offense to really make it work. And it's just been a bit more roller coastery than that for Towns this year to this point.
Yeah, I think I agree. My answer would be, I think right now in the East, I think they could. I'm not saying they absolutely would, but I think in the East, they probably could get on a offensive heater. Like you mentioned, you can trust Brunson. Cat gets on a heater. Make the wings knock down shots at a high level, including maybe if you're just going all offense, some of the guys we said we didn't trust in the playoffs, you just play them and say, hey, we're going to give up stuff offensively, but Shamit's going to win us the 3-point versus 2-point game, knocking down threes at a high rate. And you can get on a heater through the Eastern Conference, through the Eastern Conference to the finals. So my answer is I think they could. I just think that that's a little scary. And I just wish they had a little more front court depth just in general, not just for defensive purposes, but overall just for minutes purposes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. My next takeaway. Have the Orlando Magic kind of figured it out recently? So we had some concerns about the Magic earlier in the season. They're now sitting at 10-7. They've won 6 of their last 7 games. I believe that it's 7 of their last 9 as well, if you want to go a little bit further back. During that time, they have defeated the Knicks, the Clippers, the Warriors. They went to overtime with the Rockets. They beat the Nets. They beat the Knicks a second time on the road, and they've beaten the Blazers. And then in the 7 and 9, they've beaten the Celtics as well. So it hasn't been, like just a cakewalk schedule wise. It's not like they're just like demolishing bad teams. Like they've actually played pretty well against good teams. The thing worth noting here as well is that I believe that Paulo Banchero has been out, I think for the last, is it 5 or 6 games? If
5.
Memory serves.
All 5.
And then was out for a large portion of the 6th game.
Only played 12 minutes in that first one against the Knicks.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think that it's a situation. Well, let's talk about this. So just here, since November 10th, which was November 9th was the weird game where Bane took only, I think it was 1 3-point attempt. And for whatever reason, like the offense just looked so bizarre in that game against Boston. It was so weird and clunky and everything. In that time, since November 10th, they have won. They're ninth in offense, 5th in defense. They're 23rd in pace. They're middle of the league in assist rate, top 6 in turnover rate. Prior to November 10th, they were 20th in offensive rating. Their defensive rating was 5 points worse per 100 possessions. They were 24th in assist rate, 22nd in turnover rate, and 13th in pace. So essentially what you're seeing here is that they're slowing down and they're not like getting up the court as quickly, but they're executing at a higher level. Additionally, with Bane over the last 7 games during the 6-7 run, 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 44, 38, 100 from the free throw line. If you look prior to that game, Bane was at 14.2 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 43% from the field, 29% from 3, 86% from the line. So I think that what has happened, and this is like tape stuff as well, not just the numbers. I think they have gotten way more intentional about what they're running in half court settings while also being opportunistic in terms of when they run, because Franz Wagner to me is probably the most underrated transition player in the league. He is just so good at running and trying to seal early or getting out in the break and getting a cross match and just attacking the cross match regularly. Like I think we don't talk enough about Franz whenever we talk about the best transition players in the league. I think he's absolutely among that group. But moreover, I think that their half court offensive execution has just been way better. And I think that they have kind of started to figure out how to use Bane. In that 7-game run, Bane has not taken fewer than 6 3-point attempts per game, or in a single game, rather. I think that they've just kind of gotten some things together on offense while also seeing their defense take a leap from playing slower. And then Jalen Suggs' inclusion here can't be discounted either. Suggs getting back has allowed them to play at a higher level on defense, in my opinion, while also being that smart, like opportunistic team in terms of when and how and like their decision for the way they go about running. Because Suggs in that, in his last 7 games, 17.7 points, 4.4 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 51, 36, 90 in terms of his numbers. So, we know Suggs is a barometer for this team. We know that, the ability to defend and, play at a high level with him out on the court is just drastically easier. But I think that they look much better. I think that the process looks a little bit better. And we'll talk about the Paulo piece of that in a second, because I don't think it is entirely attributable to Paulo being out. But I think that there are like kind of pass on effects to Paulo being out that result in them executing a little bit better on offense. Bryce, where are you on the Orlando Magic?
My short answer to the question is yes. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I watched the Magic Knicks game. And as I was watching that, I almost flipped one of my topics to this because I'm like, okay, Bane looks more comfortable. They're using him as an advantage exploiter, not just putting the ball in his hands and using him that way. Just run this man off ball actions. And then it doesn't have to be catch and shoot. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying relegate him to catch and shoot, but get him a stampede attack or off a weak side stagger, and then he's curling and making a read or a pull-up jumper or whatever he needs to do. And Franz has been incredible. I find myself enjoying and appreciating his game more and more every time I watch. You bring up, we don't talk about him enough in transition. I always like to bring up how good of an off-the-ball cutter is. I also always like to highlight how good he is just playing in the lane in general, off 2 feet, both hands, all of these nuances. And in my notes, I said, I think he's got to be one of the best zone breakers in the NBA, not from the 3-point line, from the free throw line. He is one of the guys that I would trust the most, that if the other team went zone, Franz, go to the free throw line and we'll throw you the ball and then you make the decision from there. And I think every game I watch, the team goes zone and he just immediately destroys them one of the first couple possessions. So I like this team. I like how defensively they've seemed to figure it out a little bit. I do want to talk the Paolo thing because I don't even know where I'm at yet, but I think it's at least worth the conversation. But I think another guy I think that's played well recently is Anthony Black. I didn't think he was playing early in the season. And then I don't know what the sample is, like how far back it goes, but at least the last 5 games, maybe longer, I feel like he's played better. He contributes to that because he's a good defender, a disruptive defender. Jonathan Isaac, I like his minutes. If they can keep him on the floor offensively, they can put out a really fun lineup of like Black, Suggs, Isaac, Batadze that really is going to cause you issues offensively. But I am interested to see what you think and your takes on the Paolo thing, because watching that Knicks game, I found myself going, I really like how they're using Suggs. I really like how they're using Bane. I really like how they're using Franz. Okay, now how does this look if they insert Paolo into it? How do you keep all of them in this role while also inserting Banchero into the equation without disrupting everything or relegating him to a role that he can't be successful in? So I do think that that's something for Mosley and his staff to figure out.
Yeah, AB over his last 6, 13.5 points, 52% from the field, 32% from 3, 65 from the line. I agree with you. He's been better, is the reality. Again, like opportunistic transition, good cutter. Driving I thought driving was really effective in the Knicks game, particularly. Yeah, so I think the follow-on effects that I kind of mentioned when talking about Paulo is that I think it's made them figure out how to use Bane a little bit more intentionally and use him to like run off-ball actions to get Bane a shot instead of running Bane as like a screener for Paulo, where Paulo is the primary option and Bane is like the secondary option coming off of like, a backside action, right? And I think that the key for all of this is that I think that they just kind of need to determine. It's hard because part of me thinks that there is a real difference in terms of their ball movement, in terms of the way that they go about kind of getting half court, execution going without Paulo, because Paulo will at times just kind of freewheel and blow up some of their sets. And it's because he's such a real mismatch advantage creator that he's just capable of doing that on some level. But the other piece of it is that he has to kind of fit into what they're trying to do scheme wise too. And I do wonder how much of the success, for instance, has been that, you look and they're starting realistically 4 shooters plus Carter now, who can also step away and shoot a little bit. Like, Carter is making 46% of his threes, but like, he's not a guy that necessarily gets guarded out there. But like De Silva is a guy that teams have to guard as a shooter. Suggs, teams are like a little bit more skeptical of as a shooter, but will take them at the very least. Bane is obviously a real shooter, and say whatever about Franz. Franz is hitting 36% of his threes, and it feels like teams are getting a little bit more aggressive about guarding him out there, because if you play him short, I think he will try to drive into you and get a bit more of a head of steam, and it's a little bit harder to guard him once he gets that head of steam downhill. So the Paulo inclusion is going to have to be intentional, is the reality. I keep using that word, intentionality. With Orlando, I just felt like there was a total lack of intentionality early in the season offensively. And I think that without Paulo, they have had to get more intentional, because they have no chance to create enough mismatch situations and advantages if Paulo is not there. I feel like more so than Paulo, taking over possessions, a lot of it is that they just almost use him as a crutch sometimes, where it's okay, we can just, have Paulo bail us out on this one, right? We can just have Paulo handle this one, and he'll create a mismatch and it's fine. I would prefer to see them run similar stuff here and just use Paulo a little bit more effectively within what they're doing now. I would try to be just as intentional in what you're running on offense right now as when Paulo comes back. I think that was their problem early in the year, was that they just weren't intentional enough in trying to get to specific spots, trying to get specific shots from specific players, like Bane, for instance. Now, if Paulo comes back and he decides to completely freewheel and break this offense, that's when I think we have to have some difficult, uncomfortable conversations, because we have now seen the way that this can work a little bit without Paulo. I think it can work with Paulo. There's no reason it can't work with Paulo. He is an immensely skilled, guy who is one of the best mismatch threats in the NBA, but he has to show that also. He can't just take over possessions and kind of take some bad shots here and there. I loved what Nikola Vucevic said over the weekend. He was pissed because the Bulls got down 15 to the Wizards. Then they came back and won in the fourth quarter. And there's a really funny post-game interview where Jalen Smith and Modest Buzelis are going over to him and celebrating. And he's angry because they had to come back from 15 against the Wizards. Right. And they asked him about it after the game. And he was just yeah, the thing is that we just have to get way more locked in what we're trying to do. And we have to be way more detail oriented on how we guard opposing teams. Understanding, one guy's tendency, it might result in 2 points difference, per quarter or something, because we force a miss when we shouldn't have forced, or if we didn't do the right thing, we wouldn't have forced the miss. Well, that adds up to 8 points per quarter, 6 or 8 points per that adds up to 6 or 8 points per game. And we're, in a much better position, because most NBA games come down to 6 or 8 points is the reality. So I think that I say that just to say that I felt like Orlando was much less willing to take advantage of those low-hanging fruit things, quote unquote, in terms of being ready for the scout, and then also doing the right things offensively to get mismatches within the run of flow. And they were obviously running up and down the court as well, and they were trying to play faster, and that didn't work either, which I think is another piece of it with Paulo that, I'd be interested to see him play in this slower, offense where they're seemingly running more actions. I would guess. I don't know what the numbers say there, but just watching them, it feels like they're running more actions. Before making any big time conclusions, I want to see what Paulo looks like in that scheme and see if he is able to play within that flow and create mismatches within that flow. And can the coaches create mismatches within that flow while still getting Bane shots, while still allowing Franz to be the mismatch hunter that he is? I just kind of threw a lot at you. I understand that. It's a very complicated situation, because I don't think it's as simple as Paulo out, this is good for Orlando. I think that there are way more contextual factors than just like Paulo is out. We can't figure out how to use this incredibly talented player. You know what I mean?
So I agree with you. I think it can work with Paulo. I think it should work with Paulo. I still think that this roster makes sense to me. I do think it is on the coaching staff in some capacity to do all of the things you just outlined. And then I do think it's on Paulo to be a little bit more of a creator and kind of thrive in that role and distribute the ball to his teammates, understanding that that will ultimately make scoring the basketball easier for him long term. And I think those are the two things I'm most looking forward to when he gets back. Is he willing to insert himself? And listen, he doesn't have to average 10 assists a game, but can it be a little bit more than what we've seen in terms of a creator for others? If you're going to kind of be the offensive hub, and then can Jamal Mosley and staff do all the things you just said in terms of making sure people are still being put in the right position to be successful?
Yeah. Okay. You're up with your third takeaway.
So we talk about the middle of the pack. Sometimes we talk about the teams at the bottom. And then sometimes we just, I don't want to say we forget, but sometimes the teams that are just the best in the NBA can go unnoticed, underappreciated, and untalked about. And I just wanted to make sure that didn't happen on the Game Theory podcast. And so I want to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder and chasing historical greatness. And you were the first one that brought this up, at least to my ears, in terms of them chasing the 72-10, 73-9, whatever, 70 plus wins. And this is a team that I think sitting right now at 16-1, I think it's realistic to have this conversation, to continue to have these conversations. And I want to just throw a few things at you, Sam, and then I'll let you go. They are 7 points better than anybody else in defensive rating. That seven gap is the same as second to 22nd in the NBA. I watch the Detroit Pistons on a nightly basis and think they're a pretty good defense. And the Oklahoma City Thunder are 7 points better in terms of defensive rating. When we do all defense, we might just put 5 guys on there. But net rating, they're also 6 points better than just about, or than the Houston Rockets in second. They've only played 6 total clutch games, and we know a couple of those came early in the year when they had those crazy overtime, and their net rating is awesome in those clutch minutes. Shea has only played 52 fourth quarter minutes, Sam, and has only scored 57 points in fourth quarters. For context and comparison, Tyrese Maxey has played 160 fourth quarter minutes and had to score 133 fourth quarter points. Cade, 107, 130 respectively. AJ Mitchell is 4th in the NBA in fourth quarter minutes. I bring that up to say their depth is insane, as we all know. They have lost the second most games due to injury of any team in the NBA. So while people will bring up the strength of schedule and all of that, and I think that stuff is fair. Even our good friends, Andrew Schlecht and Alex Spears, had this a couple Saturdays ago on Slam and Jam, where I think they had played the most games against the bottom 10 teams in net rating or something like that. Like
they have had, I believe, the easiest schedule in NBA history. That's not an exaggeration. Like, I actually think that they've had the easiest schedule in NBA history to this point in terms of winning percentage that they have played.
So part of that is also because they've won 16 of those 17 games, which is going to lower that. But listen, sure. I'll subscribe to it. Like, fine. They have completely dominated those 17 games in totality. A net rating of 16 is ridiculous. They
have 9 wins over 17 points to this point.
They don't have their second best player, Sam. He hasn't played yet. And they have only gotten 9 games from Aaron Wiggins as well. Only 3 guys have played all 17 games. Now, I mean, that is Shea, which obviously matters, and Hartenstein, but then AJ Mitchell. But defensively, I don't even think Lou Dort has been good this year. Definitely not offensively.
No.
Cason Wallace is incredible. Like, we're going to have a defensive conversation about Cason Wallace at some point. I'm interested to see where you end up landing. I don't know if we want to do it today. That dude is really good. And so to me, it's like they can chase this without overtaxing their guys because they have so much depth, I guess is my argument here. And because they're so good defensively, I don't even know what my point is other than this team is awesome and I want to make sure we don't forget about it.
They are averaging 45 points a night from Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, and AJ Mitchell. And in doing so, like, Isaiah Joe has a true shooting percentage 13% above league average. Aaron Wiggins has a true shooting percentage at league average. AJ Mitchell's is like a little bit lower, but Mitchell is the guy that has like way more on his shoulders, especially in lineups where Shea is out, because Jalen Williams is not there. The fact, look, we can absolutely talk about the fact that they've had maybe the easiest schedule in NBA history to this point. They've also played, I believe that like 10 of their 17 games have been on the road, and they are a monster at home. So they're going to have like an even more like, home friendly, kind of run later in the season, if memory serves. I think this team is awesome. And again, to your point, Jalen Williams has not played. Like, Jalen Williams is already ineligible for awards essentially this year, which means that he's going to get 25% of the max. Like he's just at 25% of the max because he can't play. So long term, they're set up.
Yeah.
Short term, they're going to get Jalen Williams back, and Jalen Williams is freaking awesome. Coming off of an all NBA season, all defense season, where he was the second best player on a title team and rightfully made the All-Star game for the first time. They're 16-1 without that guy.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm Bryce. Like, again, I said this at the time. Like I said this in the preseason that I thought they were going to chase this. I thought Jalen Williams would be back by now, to be honest, was why I thought they would chase it. If you told me J-Dub was going to be out for 17 games here, even with as easy as the schedule has been, and look, like, again, let's not sugarcoat how easy the schedule has been. Their last wins, Utah, Sacramento, New Orleans, Charlotte. And then they did go on like a nice little, 2-game run of kind of beating the brakes off of the Lakers and the Warriors. But Grizzlies, Kings, lost to the Blazers, Clippers, Pelicans, Wizards, Kings, Dallas, like, and then they had that win against Indiana in the second game of the season, where Indiana's been a catastrophe so far too. So like, it's genuinely pretty crazy though that they've gotten this lucky with schedule, but also I don't think that they would be expected to have won 16 of these 17 games, if only because they're still playing NBA teams and they've had guys in and out of the lineup every single night.
Yeah.
So again, to my point here, Mark Daigneault is the coach of the year so far. I'm sorry to everybody. Like, I'm sorry to Darko. I'm sorry to
JB.
To who?
JB Bickerstaff is
to JB Bickerstaff. I'm sorry to Eric Spoelstra. Like, I'm sorry to all these guys who have done an amazing job building this team, building their teams and getting them together and everything. But this guy's the coach of the year so far. The fact that they have won 16 of 17, they have a net rating 6 points better than everybody else, and they have one all-star on the court. Like, they have one all-star. They do not, like, all due respect to Chet, he has not made that status yet. Maybe that changes this year. But with as good as Shea is, and Shea is unbelievable, he's one of the 3 best players in the league, whatever you could say he's the best, whatever you want to say. You would not expect this team to win 16 of 17 games, even against this schedule. They are ridiculously good.
Yeah, I mean, AJ's 3rd on this team in minutes played. Kaysen is 4th on this team in minutes played. Obviously, having Shea for every game is huge, but Shea plays. I mean, like, at the end of the day, he does. He plays a lot of games, especially over the last, 3-4 years of his career. And I guess here's my final point of it. It doesn't they're 16-1. So whenever my point is they're chasing historical greatness, whenever your point is they can go win 70, 72, 73, they're 16-1, which puts them on track to do that. Because if they went 13-4 through this stretch, then we could excuse that. but that makes it really hard to win 73 games when you've already lost 4 through an easy portion of your schedule. So I guess my overall point here is schedule be darned, since we're not cussing anymore. I'm like, they're putting themselves into this conversation because they've won these games and they've dominated these games, and theoretically they should be healthier whenever the schedule does get tougher. And so they are absolutely, we should be talking about them going for this right now, 17 games into the season.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right. The way we're going to close this show. So Chris Paul kind of said in the preseason that this was probably his last year. Shams reported over the weekend that this is Chris Paul's last season officially. Yeah. And I did just want to call out that Chris Paul is one of the best point guards to ever live. Yeah. And we'll talk about some of what made him special here in a second. But second, like, this is maybe the last player of his kind of, where Chris Paul is a 6 foot tall floor general point guard in an era where the league is kind of going against type with those guys. So I just kind of want to read off a list of the guys who are 6'2" or shorter, not even 6 foot, but 6'2" or shorter. Jose Alvarado, Javon Carter, Mike Conley, Steph, Rob Dillingham, Darius Garland, Colin Gillespie, Aaron Holiday, Bones Highland, Kyrie, Bronny James, Trey and Tyus Jones, Damian Lillard, Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, TJ McConnell, Jordan McLaughlin, Davion Mitchell, Donovan Mitchell, John Morant, Monty Morris, Scottie Pippen, Craig Porter, Emmanuel Quickley, Jace Richardson, Terry Rozier, Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shed, Reed Shepard, Fred VanVleet, Brandon Williams. So of those guys, this might be Mike Conley's last year. I would guess that this is Kyle Lowry's last year. Steph is closer to the end than he is the beginning. Probably not retiring this year, but we're closing in with Steph. Steph is also not this style of point guard.
Say this isn't the archetype you're referencing either.
Same with, Damian Lillard is another guy closing in on it. Then Maxey and Donovan Mitchell, those two guys aren't really this archetype either. John Morant, that seems to be going negatively, unfortunately, right now. Really, Reed Shepard, who is bigger than Chris Paul, is kind of the closest thing. Fred VanVleet's older as well, coming off an ACL. You never know how that's going to go. This year might be the last year of the small, diminutive floor general point guard that is able to dominate games, is a processor and playmaker, and they're good on defense and they get the team organized. And Chris Paul was so much more than that. We'll talk about that in a second, but 2025, 26, this might be the end, and Chris Paul's retirement is kind of the personification of that, I think, in a real way.
Well, it's funny. So I just pulled up the assist per game leaders in the NBA right now. Jokic, Cunningham, Giddey, LaMelo Ball, Doncic, Harden, Drew Holiday, Trae Young, Maxey, Austin Reeves, Ja, Steph Castle. None of those guys really fit this mold. I think this is kind of your point. This archetype is just different. And, maybe Trae Young, but Chris Paul was just insanely better defensively than what, Trae Young has ever even thought about being in his career.
Trae Young's an undersized guard that I missed, by the way. I don't know why I don't have Trae Young.
I was going to say, I didn't know if maybe he was just weirdly listed at 6'3" for whatever reason. I know sometimes that stuff is off, but it is. And he is going to be a player, I think, that is always referenced in terms of this player is a Chris Paul type of point guard or lead guard or whatever, even if players don't look like him in terms of stature. But I think that just really speaks to who Paul was, what he meant throughout his NBA career. Just looking at his stretch here early in his career of all of the all defensive teams, the all NBAs, the MVP, never won one, but how close he got some of these years, leading the league in assists, leading the league in steals. He did that in the same year 3 different times. It's hard to find a guy that does all of that in the way that Chris Paul did.
Yeah, I mean, like the 2007, 2008 year is Chris Paul's best year, I would argue. He lost to Kobe for MVP that year. That's like the Kobe team with Powell where they lost to, I think it was the Celtics, the KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo Celtics in the finals. I think Chris Paul had like a very real case to win that MVP at the very least. I'm not going to sit here and argue with Kobe winning it, but if you voted for Chris Paul, I don't think that's a crazy vote necessarily either. Chris Paul led the NBA in assists 5 times, is a 9-time all defensive team guy, despite being 6 foot tall. Like I said, second in MVP once, but also had, I believe, 2 or 3 other top 5 MVP seasons in addition to that. The most impressive thing about Chris Paul, though, statistically, before we talk about like why, he's awesome, is he led the NBA in assists. I believe it's like 15 years apart. Like he led the NBA in assists in 2007, 2008.
And then
and he also led the NBA in assists in 2022. Think about how many different eras of basketball that we've gone through in that window. And Chris Paul has just been the constant, right? Where he's always been great, really up until this year. Like he started every game for the Spurs last year.
Yeah.
And was like pretty useful for them.
Yeah. I thought he was going to be more useful for the Clippers this year than what it's been. And, eventually age catches up. He's 40 years old. I get it. It was just like he played 82 games, 28 minutes a night, averaged 9 and 7.5. Shot 38% from 3. I thought that, he was going to be able to give and obviously that's just been a disaster. I don't know. It's just, it sucks to see him go. I will say this real quick, Sam, like it's just cool to look at these basketball reference pages or real GM pages or whatever. And just kind of, his rookie year was when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school when this dude, was a rookie. And then you go through, you talk about iterations, and then he's on those Showtime Clippers teams with Blake Grip, Lob City. And it's just, and then he ends up in Houston, OKC. Everybody knows the resume, but it is cool to just kind of reminisce through somebody that had a 21-year career.
The crazy denied trade, right? Sure. Like there's so many different like pieces of it with Chris Paul too. Like, but when he was at his best, like he is faster than everybody on the court. Like maybe not faster than everybody. Like, Ty Lawson was really fast in that era too, but he was one of the fastest guys in the NBA. He could really lead you out on the break and transition. And he clearly thought the game faster than everybody else is the reality. Like the way that he processed the game and was able to throw passes off of a live dribble from any angle, from any position on the court was completely ridiculous. And then he became a monster scorer from that like elbow area, be it with those like little, like, his floater, like it felt like he'd almost like throw the ball at the rim. And it was almost like, do you know, like how when you're playing that game, the carnival game where you're just trying to like throw the ball at the basket, like that's what his floater felt like to me. And it would go in like pretty regularly. But he could also throw a touch on the floater. And obviously, like from the elbows, he was this absolute savage from the mid range. And defensively, like he was a monster. He would get his hands into all sorts of actions. He would find his way into so many different, ball screen coverages where he was so elite there. Like the guy was just such a unbelievable player to watch. And it is a bummer that this is it feels like this is kind of the end for these guys, at least for now, right? Like you and I both love Braden Smith, but like Braden Smith is probably not coming into the NBA and starting, and he's certainly not impacting the game the way Chris Paul did. Like, Braden Smith's a great player, but Chris Paul is a totally different beast, right? So yeah, I do feel like this is the end of an era ish, in a big way for the NBA.
I think it's just hard to be his size and stick out as a primary initiator. Not that teams aren't always looking for those guys, but when you have primary initiators that are just bigger than that, if you have a choice between a 6'6", 6'7" primary initiator or a 6'2" primary initiator, which one are you going to choose, right? Like, it just, there's a little bit of just like, of course you're going to take the guy that has a little bit more size and versatility defensively then, and all of that. I do feel like at some point though, we're going to get one of these, right? Like, we're going to get one of these guys that's just so good, has all the intangibles, the strength, is so good defensively, good with the floater, all of that we get one, and will bring us back to the Chris Paul type of point guards. But it is, I don't know, there's something special about these guys at the end of their careers, and just thinking about what they've gone through, the iterations of the NBA that we've seen, and just how special of a player he was. And it is, you hate to see it end, but we all know that's inevitable. So I hope he gets his flowers from people as we go throughout the rest of the season. And then, once it sounds like officially happens, and, he's remembered in the right way.
Yep, I think that's right. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky. Got the Motor City Hoops Substack if your favorite team plays the Pistons. The Game Theory Substack, where I had a breakdown on Tyrese Maxey's 54-point game. Make sure you're subscribed over there. We're doing NBA stuff along with NBA draft stuff. I did an Andrei Stojakovic one as well recently. I know we'll be talking about him on the NBA draft show coming out tomorrow. And then, of course, right here, Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Go to the Game Theory Substack, gametheorysamv.substack.com. You'll be able to see Bryce's Andrei Stojakovic breakdown. You'll be able to see a Derek Queen breakdown by the time this goes live in all likelihood. There's going to be a lot going on there. So go subscribe, hit that button. We appreciate everybody that comes through. We continue to grow and grow that thing, and we're just so immensely appreciative of everybody that has given us some of their hard-earned money. We will be back on Tuesday with the NBA draft show. So we will have some stuff on Kingston Fleming's there. We will have some stuff on the Illinois guys, maybe a couple other things that we'll talk through. And we'll probably set you up for Feast Week here moving forward. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.